Hi, I'm Joe Laramie. I'm a retired police lieutenant from Glendale, Missouri. I spent 31 years as a police officer, starting out as a juvenile officer, someone who dealt with kids in both good and bad situations. I spent 10 years as a dare officer in the classroom. I spent the last 9 years of my law enforcement career as the commander of the Missouri Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Program.
Hey, Joe, welcome. It's so good to have you here today on the podcast. To all of our smartsocial.com listeners, welcome. Joe, you've got 4 tips for us here today on how to protect children. You've got an amazing background too, but I want to ask you, from the expert, you have one of your tips is stop focusing on the tech, talk about something else. What is that tip?
Okay, well, the biggest idea is that we cannot know all of this technology that the kids are using, but we know our kids, and we need to focus on their behavior and not as much on the technology. That doesn't dismiss our work with the technology, but it's about the behavior, because if you think in terms of apps, there are no good apps, there are no bad apps. There are apps that are used for good, and their apps are used for bad acts. And our idea of parenting must be about how are they using the app, not as much about what app are they using. It doesn't dismiss any of the ideas of knowing what these apps and how they work. But if we focus only on one kind of app and we say, oh, if they have any of these 5 apps, these 5 apps are the bad apps. And if your kid has those 5 apps, then what we end up telling parents is that here's where you're going to have a problem if they have those 5 apps. But if they don't have those 5 apps, they're okay. And that just dismisses the idea of parents need to know what are they doing with those apps instead of which apps are they using.
I couldn't agree more with you. And you were afraid in the beginning. You're like, Josh, I'm going to go against what you say. And I love it when people, Joe, disagree, because we're all in this together to protect children so they can someday shine online and go get that great job, career, and everything else, because we're not going to be able to keep them away from these devices, right, Joe? I think we can agree on that. You can't keep your kids from email, from a phone, from a job someday. And that's one of our missions. So Joe, I totally agree with you. Look at the behavior, because even if we think Facebook's in the green zone or Instagram about building a reputation, a portfolio, you can't leave your kids on it alone. You got to know about those behaviors. Kudos to you. And I love that. Okay. Your tip number 2, talk to us. What is the tip number 2 that you want parents to know?
Okay. I want parents to think in terms of how do they manage their communication with their kids. So it begins with an analogy that I think explains technology safety. And that is, we teach our children to drive. We give them the keys of our car, but there's a process that goes along with that. So I remember teaching my children to drive, and you would take them onto a parking lot where there weren't any other cars, and you would teach them how to make that car go forward and backward and left and right. And then at some point, you're going to take them from that parking lot and you're going to drive out onto the road. And when they're on the road, they have to follow all of those rules that go along with the road signs, the lines on the road. And so they have to learn how to manage the vehicle. They have to learn the rules of the road. And as long as they're the right age, they can get a driver's license if they're proficient in those 2 things. But I don't know of a single parent who will hand over the keys to their car without having had not 1, not 2, but so many conversations with them about what their expectations are. Things like, how many kids can be in the car? Do you eat in the car? Do you smoke in the car? When you give your child the keys to your car and you watch them drive out of your driveway, and they're supposed to be going to some place that they told you they're going, and you watch them drive out of the driveway and they head the right direction, there is nothing that's going to keep them from going a couple blocks down the road and turning around and going another direction, except that you've built a layer of trust. You've communicated your expectations many times, your expectations that go along with consequences for both good and bad behavior, because consequences aren't just bad. Consequences can be good. So there are consequences for the good and the bad behavior. And then you have set these rules. Where are you going? Who are you going with? And what time will you be home? Pretty simple things that many of us heard as we were growing up from our parents. We should be relaying that same thing. And we would do that if we're doing that with our keys and the car. Well, that's exactly the same scenario with technology. We want to know where you're going, who you're going with, in other words, who you're communicating with, and what time you're coming home, which is how long are you going to be on, and when you can be on. Because even though our kid gets the keys to our car today, it doesn't mean that they get the keys to our car 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's rules that are attached to it. And those are just things that we do because we've given our kid the keys to our car and we trusted them enough to be out in the real world, meeting real people face to face. And yet sometimes we think in terms of, oh, well, we have to lock everything down for their use of technology because, wow, there's so many dangers. I think being in the real world where you're not in control, where you've trusted your child, really is an example of how you can do that same type of thing with technology.
Yeah, it's great points. All right. So we've talked a little bit about behavior instead of tech. We've talked about breaking down parenting without technology first, which is kind of what you're getting at. Talk to us about your tip number 3 for parents.
Okay. My tip number 3 deals with know who your kid hangs out with. Now, if you have a child and they have a friend come over to your house and they come into your home, you're going to communicate with them. You're going to say, hi, how you doing? How's your mom? How's your team doing? How's school going? I haven't seen you in a while. Tell me something that's new. Did you go on vacation this summer? We communicate with these kids who come into our home. And so then our child has a friend over and then they go off and they play or they go and watch a movie or whatever it is that they do or go play games. As they're in your home, you're not going to totally dismiss them. You are going to step into their world again and say, hey, Jimmy, do you need to call your mom and let her know that you're still here? Or are you staying for dinner? But you're going to check on them. Can I get you something to eat, guys? A snack? Whatever it is, parents step into these kids' worlds. They need to step back out again because they're not going to go park themselves and hang out with their kid and their friend. But with technology, we allow our child to have this device, sit in the same room with us, communicate with their friends or whoever, and because it's on their device, we never ask any questions. We should be saying to them, hey, who are you talking to? Oh, it's just Billy. They're texting with their friend, that's talking to them. Well, tell Billy I said hi. And what you're doing is you're just stepping into their world. And even though there's going to be a big pushback of, oh, mom, dad, seriously, what are you doing? That whole constant in and out allows you to be more involved in their life and to know who they're hanging out with. I remember the very first time, and this was on AOL Instant Messaging, so it was a long time ago, but my daughter logged into AOL Instant Messaging. She was 13 years old at the time. She logged into AOL Instant Messaging after she got home from school. I was at work. I could see her screen name pop up as she logged in, and I, for the first time, sent her a message. How was your day? That was it. A very simple communication. And her response, because this was the first time we'd ever communicated on this platform, her response was, Dad, you're freaking me out. Now, what that was because this was not the world that dads belonged in her mind. But I say we should be part of that world. I'm not saying that you hang out in that world. I'm saying you step in and you step out. Mm-hmm. You find out who they're hanging out with. You know who their friends are. And the communication goes to knowing who your child is friends with and what they do, because who your child hangs out with is who they are.
So wise and so true. I love how there's a little thing you hinted at there too that we tell parents, hey, make sure you're on the same apps as your kids, whether that's Fortnite or other things, because you want to make sure that the students also know that the wisdom that the parents have also extends into that virtual world, meaning they can't yell F-bombs all the time. They can't behave that way, or they shouldn't be around other people that do. It should be very similar. Parents dive in deep. And I love how you say, step into your kids' world. Like when the friends come over, like, hey, let me set you up in the play area, hang out. Okay, I'm going to be in the other room for just a minute. And then you step back in to check in on them, right? Just like in real life. And you're suggesting we do that online, which is so great. Hey, Joe, I want to thank you for your time here today. You are a wealth of knowledge, and you're an absolute hero for all the stuff you've done for 3 decades. as an officer in law enforcement and all the internet crimes against children, the work that you've done, the stuff that you're continuing to do. Those of you that are listening or watching, you can click the links above or below to learn more about Joe and all the great stuff that he does and how you can support him and his cause and organizations like that. The rest of you, if you're looking for tactical tips to make sure you're keeping your kids safe, we have an incredible webinar for parents that's all about the safety tips, the hidden safety tips they don't want you to know inside of Netflix, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and a bunch of other tips. We're also going to show you parts of your Android and your iPhone that they don't want you to know. Just like what Joe was saying, it's more about behaviors. There's also hidden bad parts in every single app. And we want to be where your kids are at so that you understand how to navigate the most popular apps right now before your kids have them or while they have them. Educators, we're not leaving you behind. We've also got an amazing educator webinar. You can click the links below to learn more at smartsocial.com. It's going to give you 7 incredible tips to reduce bullying and increase dialogue on campus as we go into 2020 in this very unusual time, both online with remote learning and in person. Whatever the future holds, we've got a few tactics that are more about approaching the student rather than just looking at, well, one bad thing to avoid. It's how do we have a bigger picture about supporting that student. For all of you listening, watching, please rate, subscribe, and review so that we can reach more parents and more students to protect them. Joe, thanks again for your time here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you. We'll see you soon. As always, keep it light, bright, and polite. Your kids are watching what you're doing online. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.